This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 17th of June 2021 and I am 2J.
I'm Duam.
And I'm GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, RAILA gain, Ruto lost. In the Standard, tweets that tell story of fallout. And in the Star, 2022 polls, IEBC tells civil servants to quit by February. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now today, I will issue a memo to Kikuyus. Greetings, people of the mountain. When was the last time you had a mental checkup? I ask this because you are exhibiting some signs as your tin pot god, Mr. Ruto. You are showing signs of madness. And I say this because Mr. Ruto has told you, because he really cares about you, that he will give you 100 million shillings hustler fund every year. Yes, Mr. Ruto's hustler fund is 100 million shillings per constituency. Excuse me. He tells you this money is to support boda bodas, mama mbogas, shoe shiners and the like. When you interrogate what 100 million shillings really means, then you discover Kikuyus have gone mad. Consider my thoughts. Assume Ruto is president today and he begins his hustler fund pilot in Mount Kenya. Kiharu constituency, with a population of 179,000 people, will receive 558 shillings per person every year. Can you imagine? I even have to cough. Now, Gatundu South, with a population of 107,000 people, will receive 934 shillings per person. Railroad constituency, with a population of 490,000 people, will get 204 shillings per person.
Per year.
Per year. Mr. Ruto has convinced you, Kikuyus, that he will make you richer because Uhuru has made you poor. And the only way to make you richer is to give you a hustler fund. But before we even call you names, let's flip the script. Uhuru Kenyatta has constructed 2,200 kilometers of road in central Kenya alone. Kibaki only constructed 82 kilometers in Mount Kenya. Along one of the roads Uhuru is building, connecting Gatanga to Nyandarua, a 68-kilometer road, land prices before construction were 500,000 shillings per acre. Now, because of the road, land prices have shot up to 4 million shillings per acre. The value of their land has multiplied 8 times, all because of a road. Over 200,000 people living across that road have been made millionaires by a single road. But that's not it. There is a 600-kilometer long road being built that has connected 5 Mount Kenya counties. It is called the Mau Mau Road. It is longer than the Nairobi-Mombasa highway. Question is, if a 68-kilometer road can make over 200,000 people millionaires, how many more millionaires will it make across people who live along the 600-kilometer highway? It is just mind-boggling. Back to my lovely Kikuyus. Here is a memo. If you are waiting for the economic revolution to begin under Ruto, it has already begun under Uhuru. Eat what you can now, because if and when the conman becomes president, you will be receiving a 500 shilling hustler dividend every year, and you will forever regret singing Hasura Nation.
I enjoyed the numbers, the other bits around it, not so sure. Anyway, I think that we can move on to the Standard, which tells us today about the keyboard warrior-in-chief, your same friend, Mr. William Ruto. The headline story is focusing on how the deputy president is relying more and more on Twitter to get the word out. And if I'm being quite honest, this was a very interesting analysis on the influence of social media on our politics. But I want to look at this through the lens of the Lucifer principle. This is a favorite of the Fort Hall School of Government from a book of the same title. So the Lucifer principle asks how evil is manifested. And it concludes that violence, destructiveness, and war is woven into our biological fabric. But more importantly, that good attracts evil, and that they are the two are part of the same coin.
Correct.
So with that in mind, let's talk about the politics of Twitter. Because the good around Twitter is easily its ability to widely and quickly share information and engage with people. This has been the obvious benefit of social media. But at the core of the Lucifer principle, like I said, is how this good can attract evil. So yes, Twitter is shaping politics, but to what extent? Is it speaking to truth, or is it brewing a false indicator of support? On one hand, its evil can provide a false sense of security. Political leaders believe that the views and the likes that they generate online are representative of the general public. But the problem is, they're not. Don't forget, Twitter users in Kenya are only around like 1.7 million. So when certain people are tweeting violently, they're reaching only 2.9% of the country's population. What did we hear the other day? Guy Fafa, right? But on the other hand is that worse evil, that Twitter has the ability to set the agenda for what mainstream journalists cover.
Yes.
So the DP's mad tweet the other day went from being seen by a couple thousand people online to the masses in the country during primetime news. This is not healthy. But this was clearly the objective of the tweet.
Yes.
On a day when the news should have been dominated by the building of political alliances, the deputy president managed to confuse the public for his own gain. But remember this, Twitter is not real. And if we look at America, Donald Trump, his way came from Twitter. His way up and his way down. So my question is, could this fate be closely awaiting others? We'll see.
Let's see. So if Uhuru is indeed starting to make clear who his successor should be, I can only imagine that he fell back on some wisdom from the Roman philosopher Seneca, who said, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. The opportunity is 2022, that's a fact, but few are prepared is also a reality. So allow me to share a story about a great warhorse who awaited his rightful owner. One day a farmer found the horse and asked, would you like to be my horse? The horse shook its head and said, I'm a warhorse. How can I be reduced to doing such hard labor? And the farmer went on his way. When a merchant came and asked, would you like to be my horse? This horse shook his head and said, I am a warhorse. How can I be reduced to just delivering goods? And the merchant went on his way. Then a soldier of low rank came and asked, would you like to be my horse? The horse shook his head and said, I am a great warhorse, suitable only for an emperor. How can I be reduced to participating in such petty battles? Then one day, a mighty emperor appeared and said, you are the horse that I've been looking for all my life. Are you familiar with the lands of my country? The horse replied, no. Do you have any experience in battle? The horse replied, no. Then the emperor said, what use will I have for you? You don't know the lands of our country and you have no experience in battle. How can I trust you with my life? The horse replied, I am strong and I can run fast. And so the emperor tested the horse and had him run across a vast field. But on his way back, the horse grew tired and the emperor left before the horse could even reach him. If the horse had been willing to work with the farmer, he would have built up enough strength. If he were willing to deliver goods for the merchant, he would have learned the lands of the country. And if the horse was less prideful and went with a low-ranked soldier, he would have had experience in battle. The warhorse had an opportunity, but he was not prepared. Mine is just a question. Who between Ruto and RAILA is the warhorse? Who does Uhuru think is the warhorse?
Interesting question.
So I was like,
food for thought.
You know, one has 10,000 hours.
And the other?
The other one has 10,000 minutes.
Oh, Lord. So, guys, we had 3 headlines and we have a 3-part criteria. Is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? Is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? RAILA gain, Ruto loss. Tweets that tell a story of a fallout. I suspect we threw out the star.
Throw out the star,
Very
please.
far.
Yeah. I quite like both, the star, the Daily Nation and the Standard. But I think I would go with the story of a fallout.
And now our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled What Makes Your Brain Happy and Why You Should Do the Opposite by David DeSalvo.
Yes. So this book reveals a remarkable paradox. what your brain wants is frequently not what your brain needs. In fact, much of what makes our brains happy leads to errors, biases, and distortions, which make getting out of our own way extremely difficult. So DeSalvo argues, and I quote, that our brains are prediction and pattern detecting machines that desire stability, clarity, and consistency, which is terrific, except when it's not. And the first chapter of this book is about how our attachment to certainty can sometimes let us down. So he gives this story of Phil, a teacher at a school for deaf and blind students. So Phil recalls a situation when he had just started his job. He was making nightly rounds of all the floors in the blind student dorm to ensure that every student was in his or her room. So normally, room checks are equated with lights out. But in this case, he was instructed that the blind students often sleep with their lights on because lights on or off doesn't really matter to them. And it was actually better for safety reasons anyway. So as Phil made his rounds, floor after floor, he found that all the students' lights were on and each student was in their room. Then he came to a room with the lights off, which was an exception to what was now a well-established rule. Lights on, student in the room. So he walked into the darkness and called out the student's name. No answer. He called again. Still no answer. So he goes into a panic and he puts the school on lockdown and they go looking for the student for a search. Now at some point during the search, something occurred to Phil. He ran back up to the student's room, put on the light, and found that the student was lying comfortably in his bed with his earphones on. It seemed so obvious. But what happened? First, Phil was introduced to a new rule for success. When the lights are on, success is achieved. And then he experienced multiple instances of the lights being on, room after room, floor after floor. So these experiences reinforced his brain's recalibration and solidified this new rule. To put it another way, Phil's attention became exceedingly selective. He himself became blind to details that could have changed the outcome. So the author then asks, what could Phil have done differently?
Right.
And he says that he should have just slowed down. He should have put the lights on. Another few moments of deliberation would likely have opened his eyes to the details that he was leaving out. But to do so, he would have to challenge his sense of being right, this marriage that he had to certainty. And I think that was one of the great lessons that I learned from this book. I think slow down, think a bit.
Absolutely. Now, ladies, last week in the book Take Pride by Tracy Jessica, we spoke about the bluff display, a concept coined by primatologists that equates human confidence attributes to that of apes. That when you see a fake it till you make it guy, be sure he learned it from apes. Now, today I'll also talk about monkeys and humans. And I love the chapter on socializing with monkeys like us. Herein, the author says that in as much as human behavior derives from monkey behavior, both sets of primates are worlds apart. And the reason this is the case is the difference between natural selection and culture evolution. DeSalvo compares capuchin monkeys and human beings. He says that watching the capuchins is just like watching a human soap opera without the cheesy dialogue. Monkeys display jealousy, grief, worry, joy, and a range of other emotions that we used to think were exclusive to humans. They also cheat on their partners and steal and alienate others just like humans do. But the dynamics of monkey society are not like our own. In some ways, they are startlingly similar. And that's because natural evolution and cultural evolution move entirely different at different speeds. Culture moves faster than natural selection to ever catch up biologically. But more importantly, our social infrastructure is far more complex than natural selection. An example is if you see monkeys going through emotional undercurrents, the monkey will employ its natural instincts to deal with emotional turmoil. The human being will choose to see a shrink. And the reason this is the case is because culture has proved the human being tools to deal, that human being tools or choose to deal with its environment better than natural selection will ever do. So the lesson here is for Tracy Jessica. If I choose to fake it till I make it, I never learned it from apes. And that's because apes have no cultural evolution.
Oh, wow. Is that a final thought crossover?
Yeah.
That's a first. Well done to him.
Thank you.
So I really like this book. I love the idea is that we should constantly be challenging ourselves to think different from our default, right? So we're always trying to, we've learned patterns over time. So in chapter 2, she talks about, he talks about seductive patterns. And he says that there's this compulsion for humans to connect experiences, symbols, images, and ideas. And this obviously is how we have evolved culturally. This is how we do social learning, which is also from last week when we did Take Pride, the book that Tuam just spoke about. But he gives an interesting study. It's a study about coffee. So basically, imagine a study on the effects of drinking coffee comes into the news, indicating that if you drink 3 cups of coffee, you will basically improve your attention and your memory. So this guy goes ahead and increases his cups of coffee to 3 every day. And then for the next month, he actually thinks he's more attentive and more focused and is remembering things better. Then another study comes out, a newer study with all sorts of experts, and says, actually, just 2 cups of coffee will decrease your attention and heighten your anxiety. Human decides, oh, actually, I have been feeling a little bit more anxious, and actually, I don't know what's going on with my attention. So he reduces the coffee again. Months later, another study comes out discrediting the second study, saying actually the first study was actually correct. Your 3 coffees will increase your attentiveness and all that. So he says that we are constantly experiencing these scenarios, and what humans look for are these causal links to our behavior. He says that instead of the experience we're going through paying attention to that, we're paying attention to make a story, having a story make sense to us. So we're always trying to make things connect. We're always trying to make things make sense for us, but to our detriment, because sometimes we just go down a rabbit hole of following different pieces of advice. And actually, he calls it the smoking monkeys phenomenon. So we're all about monkeys today. But basically that our brains are always searching for the story that makes sense. The other thing that I got from it, from the book, was this idea of discounting the future. That as humans, whenever we're presented with the ability to make a commitment that is a long way off, but we have an immediate reward right now, you tend to take that commitment less seriously. So what happens is, let's say your boss tells you, could you take on a project that will increase your workload? But that job starts 6 months from now. So in the immediate moment, you will say yes, because you know that if you say yes, your boss will, think that you're a stellar and great employee. But when 6 months comes down the line, you're dreading it, and you actually don't pay attention to that and don't want to do it because it's too much work. And they call this the intensity bias, which simply means that we're poor forecasters of how we might feel weeks from now. And so usually we tend to make those decisions in a very irrational sort of way. So that's what I got from the book. Very interesting one.
I really like the first one you're talking about, searching for a story that makes sense. And I feel like in Kenya, the media are the holders of that narrative. And then Kenyans read the story, they hear that, oh no, you should have 100 kilometers. And then they're told, no, you should have 50 kilometers. And they don't know what's happening because they're getting all of the information from one biased source. There you go. Watch The Fifth Estate instead.
Absolutely.
And on that note, actually, TJ, I'll end with this. Since the early days of studying propaganda used during World War II, psychology research has demonstrated that the more a message is repeated, the more likely we are to believe it, particularly if we are paying little attention. So pay lots of attention in the next few months. And on a day where we had a winning headline from The Standard. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on TV. Go TV.